word that's severely overused in 2016, it's offended. In gaming this year, we've seen outcries over everything from scantily clad characters and beat-em-ups, heaven forbid, to a whole load of finger-pointing, mostly at developers who were previously minding their own business. In many instances, it feels like people have just swapped out the sensation of reacting to something with that of taking offense. To that end, it's important to really take stock of what you're witnessing, the intent behind it, and whether so much outrage is truly deserved. It's way too easy for only a few keywords of a given story to be highlighted or taken out of context, resulting in only a fraction of any full picture ever being considered. The games industry may be one of the biggest in all entertainment, thereby meaning that any stumbles in public pratfalls get witnessed by millions of eagle-eyed consumers. But there are still many instances where people get far too carried away. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 offensive video game moments you need to see for yourself. Number 10, Hotline Miami 2's rape scene. Even if you're totally fine with any type of controversial content being included, which, in theory, I am, it's a strange beat to open your twin-stick shooter with an attempted rape sequence. Developer Denaton Games even included the option to skip it in the main menu, potentially showing that even they didn't believe in their vision for this grimy, blood-soaked opener. Regardless, Hotline Miami 2 explores the ramifications of how society and the media react to controversial subject matter, seeing a film director paint the original game's anti-hero as a sexual predator. This manifests at the end of the tutorial level as your actor pushes a woman to the floor, drops his trousers, and begins to climb on top of them. Thankfully, the director jumps in and yells cut, and you realize that it's all been staged. But that didn't stop thousands of publications still running with the whole Hotline Miami 2 has a rape scene anyway, alongside all sorts of descriptions of the scene that simply weren't true. However, the bottom line remains, is rape acceptable in any context, simply to make a point about media distortion? Number 9, Tekken 7's revealing character models. Last I checked, it wasn't the 1950s, and that's before you get to the fact that an escapist medium such as video games should be the go-to place for pretty much any aesthetic choice, be it scantily clad, fully covered, or anything in between. Naturally, that didn't stop the SJWs, as they tend to get labeled, getting stuck in to attack the fact that Tekken 7 was receiving some very Dead or Alive style bikini costumes. Why objectify the women over the men, they screamed. Well, actually, we're doing costumes for the male characters too, came the figurative reply from Namco, as Tekken creator Katsuhiro Harada really laid into those complaining who hadn't done the research. He was quoted, "A lot of times, the swimsuits were a good example. People who don't even play the game, they maybe just hear that there are swimsuits in it and then they say, whoa, but you have these girls in sexy swimwear? What's wrong with you? You're such a male chauvinist, etc. But what they don't know is that it started off in the arcade, and it's a season line, like you do for Christmas, Halloween, or whatever. It's not just the women either. Robots have them, Kuma, Panda, the male characters all have swimwear. It's not like we're trying to sexualize the female characters at all. But they don't go and look for that info before they criticize, so that's pretty frustrating. What do you think?" Number 8. Manhunt 2 gets banned for being too violent. Films have video nasties, and although gaming doesn't necessarily specialize in ludicrously gory titles anymore, save for the occasional Mortal Kombat or Doom, back in the 2000s, Rockstar were the bad boys of the medium through and through. As a result of releasing 2 GTA titles that rocked the world and got Fox News anchors writing multiple stories a week about how it was destroying America's youth, they quickly followed it up with Manhunt, a game so disgustingly brutal and violent it was implicated in a real-life murder. Following that, they returned in 2008 with Manhunt 2, to which it felt like the mainstream populace were ready and waiting with pitchforks outstretched. As a result, the game was granted an AO rating in America, which is the same as pornography, severely limiting who would stock it, and the BBFC outright refused to classify it in the UK, meaning Rockstar had to add filters and other obscuring effects just to get it out the door. Naturally, all this did was put even more eyes on the title than ever before, resulting in solid sales figures. Thankfully, Manhunt 2 was a stellar action title with a killer closing twist to boot, if you could find somewhere that was selling it anyway. Number 7, Metal Gear Solid 5's justification of Quiet's costume. Oh, Hideo Kojima, sometimes you're just your own worst enemy. Case in point, the portrayal of character Quiet, a scantily clad female sniper who in the run-up to release was played up to be someone with a dark secret. Kojima even stated, though he'd later claimed that he was mistranslated, that once we found out why Quiet was dressed this way, we'd be ashamed of our words and deeds. It's especially notable in retrospect because the reality of why Quiet was perpetually half-naked came down to the fact that she breathed through her skin. Sure. Also, the reason she can't talk is down to Snake torching her vocal cords out with a Molotov cocktail, before a parasitic infection replaced them in such a fashion that they'd kill her if she ever spoke a word of a specific language. Because Metal Gear. Kojima would go on to license a figure of Quiet that had squeezable boobs, yes really, as well as insisting that her ludicrous aesthetic and the many, many up-close shots of her breasts and behind were to instigate a discussion on how the public discussed such things in the first place. Mission accomplished on the conversation front, but when scenes inside Metal Gear 5 have Quiet become the victim of torture and attempted rape, only for the tables to be turned when she gets her kit off again, it sends absolutely the wrong message to all players. Just get naked and it'll be okay. Regardless of intention, that's just a little bit monstrous and ultimately very ill thought out. Number 6, South Park The Stick of Truth's censored anal probing scene. Working on a board for something like the BBFC must be a ridiculous process. And in fact, if you listen to many South Park DVD commentaries, Trey Parker and Matt Stone routinely chuckle about the tiniest of changes that have to be made to controversial material before it can go through. For Stick of Truth, however, they just couldn't get all the rating boards from across the world to agree on anything, resulting in many different versions of the game with different cultural allowances for specific scenes. The biggest offenders, though, a vicious and pretty hilarious alien anal probing scene where Dan's father Randy is on the receiving end, and a scene where you carried out an abortion with a vacuum. In America, both were viewable as intended. In the UK, however, we received a hilariously written text prompt that appeared where the scenes were supposed to go, chastising our country's standards for being so ridiculous, whereas in Australia, both were censored across all platforms. I mean, firstly, anyone even remotely interested is just going to hop on YouTube to see all the clips in their glory as soon as possible, and second, the game still features a level where you battle groups of Hail Hitlering Nazi fetuses who shout in soundbites taken from some of the Führer's most infamous speeches. That was okay, but anal probing wasn't? All or nothing, surely. Number 5, Tracer's over-the-shoulder pose in Overwatch. Nope, I was wrong before. It really is the 1950s all over again. What you can see is the original victory pose the character of Tracer was given in the game's initial beta. It resulted in a public outcry as thousands lobbied against Blizzard, declaring that such a pose was offensive and reduced the character to a generic bland female. I mean, I too have noticed how everyone from the Avengers Black Widow to Divergent's Trish Pryor are always doing the same, oh, caught you looking, over-shoulder pose, but it's literally replicated everywhere from the red carpet to your average Instagram model. If we're acknowledging a problem, it's clearly wider than just a video game featuring a bunch of cartoon superheroes. Still, Blizzard promptly responded and removed the offending pose, replacing it with one that mimicked the shape of a pinup model from the 1950s. Almost as if they were literally saying, okay, if you have a problem with this, we're officially going backwards. Number 4, the Punisher's torture sequences. Oh, how the depictions of torture have waxed and waned over the years. One minute it's the worst thing imaginable for the Punisher to dunk people's heads into piranha tanks or for a wayward shark to gnash their legs off. The next, 24, the game has multiple interrogations that play out in a far more serious fashion. The latest example would have to be GTA 5 sequence, where Trevor uses pliers, buckets of water, and more to extract information. But being that that was just in 2013, it would seem attitudes have calmed. The Punisher, on the other hand, had media outlets in a twist, purely because many concerned parents thought the action of controllable torture, i.e. using the analog sticks to apply pressure in different sorts of scenarios, made the experience far too real. THQ eventually had to cede, adding a number of blurry black and white filters to the US version to avoid keeping the AO rating that was granted upon first review, and even having to make the camera cut away from events on screen altogether for the BBFC to grant release in the UK. This resulted in ludicrous moments where the shot of Frank torturing someone would suddenly zoom unnaturally into his face, all his blood and viscera splattered around the outside of the frame. Because sure, there was no way the PC owners were just going to hack that immediately anyway. At the end of the day, we're still going to find a way to find it, especially when the scenes are still in the game. You can't just point a camera away from it and hope for the best. Number 3, Bully is homoerotic and glorifies child violence. Except that it absolutely 100% does not. Emblematic of the general populace latching onto the most reactionary thought process possible, although its name didn't help, Rockstar's Bully was actually about standing up for yourself, defending the more unpopular cliques in school, and ostensibly making an effort to stop bullying rather than encourage it. That didn't matter to those in pursuit of a quick headline grab though, as lawyer Jack Thompson promptly took aim, alongside a ton of right-wing media outlets, saying, and I quote, "You punch people, you hit them with slingshots, you dunk their heads in dirty toilets. There's white on black crime in this game. You bludgeon teachers and classmates with bats. It's absolutely nuts." Yeah, it is a bit nuts, Mr. Thompson, because you've not really played it. He managed to kick up such a fuss though, that the game had to be renamed in the UK, emerging as Canis Canem Edit, which was dog eat dog in Latin, for years, until Bully was finally restored for many digital re-releases. Thompson also took aim at the fact that you can have character Jimmy Hopkins make out with a male student, just as you can with the more readily available female NPCs. In an email that he sent to ESRB President Patricia Vance at the time, he stated, "We just found gay sexual content in Bully, as Jimmy Hopkins makes out with another male student. Good luck with your teen rating now, Paddy." All of this insinuating that somehow homosexual relations needed to be relegated to a mature rating. Thankfully, he was disbarred in 2008. Number 2, Tomb Raider's rape scene. Another case of the internet and the world's media blowing something out of proportion, although in fairness, this did originate with a spark, rather than nothing at all. So basically, in the promotion of 2013's rebooted Tomb Raider, producer Ron Rosenberg referred to a scene where a male enemy stands dominantly over Lara as that of a sexual assault, where Lara is forced to fight back and killed to survive. This was categorically not true, and it was stated as much by Crystal Dynamics' Daryl Gallagher, who later clarified, While there is a threatening undertone in the sequence and surrounding drama, it never goes any further than the scenes that we have already shown publicly. Sexual assault of any kind is categorically not a theme that we cover in this game. You can see the scene for yourself right now. It really is a case of Rosenberg inferring an intention that wasn't there. Number 1. Everything about Bulletstorm. Perhaps it was just a slow news day, but Fox News blogger John Brandon, who was maybe just a bit annoyed that he didn't have a surname, decided Epic Games' new release Bulletstorm was tantamount to Dancing with the Antichrist. He promptly deemed it the worst game in the world. As commentator Carol Lieberman chimed in, insinuating Bulletstorm was responsible for a rise in rapes and sexual crimes that had been reported at the time. She was quoted as saying, "The increase in rapes can be attributed in large part to the playing out of sexual scenes in video games." Brandon continued to enact quite the crusade against the game's gory nature across its release period, resulting in many non-gaming sites following suit. EA responded by standing firmly behind the fact the game was rated 17+ for mature audiences only. But sadly, thanks to a combination of pirated copies and Fox News being a-holes about the whole thing, in the end, Bulletstorm just couldn't turn a profit for Epic Games. This is one of the sad instances where media sensationalism actually had a pretty negative effect. And that's our list. Which offensive video game moments, genuine or otherwise, do people really need to see for themselves? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can find us